Time for some audience questions. As always, with our audience, we have the best audience out there. They send in a ton of questions, and we could literally answer questions for the next 8 hours. So again, I got the timer. Once the timer goes off, we will wrap it up. So here we go. First question comes in from Creationist Crybaby. How do we like that, Professor McQueen? So Creationist Crybaby.
Let's see what they said.
Question for David. Why are fossil organisms found in association with other fossils from coherent ecosystems, not violently transported and mixed with organisms from dissimilar environments?
Okay, well, let me answer that. The idea of violent transport is certainly tied in with a catastrophic view. And I think we can point to different areas on Earth where there is a mixture of terrestrial versus marine creatures, but it's not always the case. And let me use one example for the crybaby to cry about. And we will go back to the example of what we find in coal worldwide. Now, if you, crybaby, look back at some of the presentations of John Mackay in Florida, in Australia, and Joseph Herbert in the UK, you'll find that they have documented photographically and with field work that you can go worldwide, and you do actually find worldwide polystrate fossils. In the Nashville area of Tennessee, I have seen it with my own eyes. You have these layers, and you've got a tree, it's a fossil tree, not a modern tree, but this tree is going through all the different layers. So I'm not going to take the time to get all the different colors of Play-Doh, but as you look at this tree, all the way to the top, it's going through different layers. And so my counter argument to Crybaby's concern is that how come you find this at all? Are you trying to tell me that the old model of allochthonous versus autochthonous coal is worth debating? My colleague, Dr. Steve Austin, in 79, got his PhD from Penn State, and he showed that in the Kentucky number 12 coal, the coal was not autochthonous. In other words, it wasn't growing in a peat bog. It had been transported, and that's what the word allochthonous means, a lot of movement. And in that transport, many of these structures are retained. And so even when you've got a catastrophic transport of some of these environments, you can still see the polystrate tree. But Crybaby, what I want you to think about is how can you explain this within the environment of a worldwide flood? Okay, Creationist Crybaby is back again.
Yes, Creationist Crybaby is back for more with a follow-up question or objection, Professor McQueen.
Read the question for me and let me ponder it here.
Okay. So CC asks, David, in the Grand Canyon, why is there evidence of layers formed above sea level, including abundant mud cracks, raindrop prints, ripple marks, and small animal tracks?
Okay, let me answer that with what I have seen with my own eyes. And those are the small animal tracks in the Coconino sandstone. And so let's go to that on the board here now that I finally got a tripod that works. Crybaby, if you actually go to the canyon and walk down one of the trails, I would suggest that you start with what's called the Bright Angel Trail from the south rim down. And when you hike down that trail, you'll find, and again, here's a tree to indicate this is a cross section. You'll find some rocks at the top, and then as you hike down, you will find this white Coconino sandstone. And what's amazing is this thing is about it's about 100 meters thick, or put in the English system, 300 feet thick. And when you look at it, let me get a different color. When you look at it, it is cross-bedded. And what is meant by that is, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, you can see that. That there are cross beds in it like this. Well, I have observed, if we take this to 3 dimensions, I've observed in the Coconino, we can take this now to 3 dimensions, make it a block, and remove this tree business here. And I have seen these footprints in the Coconino. And in the mid-'80s, one of my graduate students and one of Steve Austin's graduate students was a guy named John Whitmore. Well, he grew up to get a doctorate and is now a professor at Cedarville University. He did quite a study of these, and he found that these creatures were walking up in water, ridges that had been formed underneath water. So my critique is that it's not aeolian, it's not wind blown. Why would I say that? Because if you go to the beach and look at real beaches that are migrating, what you find is not something with knife edge context like this, but rather what you find at a real beach, like on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. When you look at a real beach, and here's a little tree there, you find sand dunes, and you find what's called a littoral zone off the beach, and you go up, and there are other things here. If you can imagine this marching across America to the Grand Canyon, you should expect to find not knife edge contacts like that, but rather undulating contacts. And so I will defer for another night this discussion about ripple marks and so forth. That's a topic for another night.
Question comes in from Creationist Crybaby. So appreciate the question.
Oh, I recognize that name from the past.
Mm-hmm. One of our best fans. So question is, Professor McQueen, how do you account for the fact that we've dated rocks in the Earth's crust, as well as moon rocks and meteorites, and have calculated that the Earth is 4.54 billion years old?
Well, Crybaby, I would suggest you watch the debate next Sunday that I'm going to have with lowercase king Crocoduck. Why would I say lowercase king? You know, he claims to be an atheist, so he doesn't worship the king, capital King, of the Bible that preserved the evidence for the age of the earth. But when we have our 2-hour debate, I think you'll find a number of technical references that will help you to understand why I don't think the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. But now let me be fair to your question. How do you account for the fact, okay, you date rocks on the Earth and you date rocks on the moon and meteorites, and these numbers come out to be 4.5 billion years old? Well, the answer to that is scientific bias. If you look at all of the, and let's use uranium, lead, and it might be better since we're talking about meteorites and the moon to use rubidium strontium method. Let's use rubidium strontium. So they get the rocks back from Apollo 11 and they begin to date them. And one rock might yield a date on the moon of 2 billion years. Another rock might yield a date of 10 billion years. Well, as the astrogeologists, as they were called, were sitting there in Houston and gathering all this data, they remembered what they had been taught back in Geology 101, that two things have to be true. The Earth has to be old for evolution to be true in their minds. That if you've got enough time, at least naive high school students will believe that there's enough time for evolution to occur. The second thing is the bias of an idea like the old Earth. If we can convince ourselves that the Earth is old, then we have no accountability to a creator. If the Earth is only 6,000 years old, we're pretty close to history. Let me give you one of my favorite examples. I was born in 1952. My dad, Edwin McQueen, was born in 1914. My grandfather, H.H. McQueen, was born the year after Darwin died. So if you go back 3 generations, my dad, my grandfather, my great-grandfather was contemporary with Darwin. We live in a world that's not that old, and we need to understand that we're accountable to a creator. If everything's 4.5 billion years old, we can erase from the whiteboard accountability.